Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast. Get ready for a really fascinating, though sometimes quite tough, adventure into a story from our past.
Yeah, today we're really diving into the world of the Radium Girls. These were women working in factories in the U.S. early 20th century.
And they were painting watch dials, right?
Yep.
With this glow-in-the-dark radium paint. We've got sources here that detail their work, the terrible health effects they suffered, and the huge impact their story eventually had. Legally, scientifically, everything.
Absolutely. So the mission today, for everyone listening, is to really get a grip on the key events, understand the human cost, which was immense, and the legacy these women left behind.
We'll look at how they were told this stuff. This radium paint was harmless. Totally fine.
When in reality, they were ingesting deadly amounts, and this led to just devastating health problems, but also, importantly, to some groundbreaking changes in labor laws, worker safety.
Okay, so let's start in the beginning. Where was this happening, and what exactly was the job?
Right, so think primarily of three main factory locations. First one was in Orange, New Jersey. That started up around 1917, give or take.
Okay.
Then you had Ottawa, Illinois, kicking off in the early 1920s, and also Waterbury, Connecticut, around the same time, the 1920s.
And their job, day in, day out, was painting watch dials.
And the hands.
Exactly. With this paint called Undark. It was, self-luminous. Made by companies like the United States Radium Corporation, USRC, and another one called Radium Dial Company.
Undark. Okay, what was actually in it?
Well, the recipe, if you will, was pretty simple, but obviously deadly. It was powdered radium, the radioactive element, then zinc sulfide, which is a phosphor. That's what actually glows when the radiation hits it.
Oh, okay.
And then some binders, gum arabic, water, just to make it into a workable paint.
Now, this is the part that always gets me. The method they used. How did they apply it?
Yeah, this is really central to the tragedy. They needed a super fine point on their brushes, right? For the tiny numbers on the dials.
Makes sense. Delicate work. So the supervisors actually encouraged them, told them to use this technique called lip dip paint.
Lip dip. Wait, they put the brush in their mouths?
Every single time. To shape the bristles into a perfect point, they were told using rags or water to clean or shape the brush was like wasteful. Wasted paint, wasted time.
That's just horrifying, especially because they were told it was safe.
Completely. The messaging was consistent. The paint was harmless. Absolutely nothing to worry about day after day ingesting radioactive material.
And there's that detail, sometimes called a fun fact, but it's really quite chilling.
Oh, you mean about them playing with it?
Yeah. Because they thought it was safe, some of the women would actually paint their nails with it. Or their teeth, even dab it on their faces for fun, to glow when they went out at night.
It paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it? This beautiful, eerie glow, completely unaware it was poisoning them. It just shows the total disconnect, the dangerous misinformation.
And the contrast with the company bosses and scientists is stark, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. People at USRC, the owners, the chemists, they knew radium was dangerous. They handled it very carefully themselves.
How so?
They used lead screens, tongs, masks even. They avoided direct exposure. And get this, USRC was actually distributing literature to doctors and scientists describing the injurious effects of radium.
So they knew. They knew, and they didn't tell the women actually handling it constantly.
Precisely. The knowledge was there within the company, just not shared with the workers on the factory floor.
And what about the pay for this incredibly hazardous work?
Right. Well, it wasn't making them rich. It was piecework. They got about a penny and a half per dial piece.
Penny and a half, yeah.
So if you were quick and managed to paint maybe 250 dials in a shift, which sounds like a lot of fiddly work,
Definitely.
you'd earn about $3.75 for that shift.
And in today's money, that's roughly.
Adjusting for inflation, somewhere around 92 hours and $24. So decent money for the time, maybe, for women's work, but certainly not worth, dying for.
No kidding. It really highlights the exploitation.
Yeah.
They were essential for the product, but totally kept in the dark about the risks.
Yeah, the human cost was just beginning to mount.
So let's talk about those costs.
Yeah.
The horrifying consequences. What started happening to these women?
Well, often the first signs were dental issues, which seems maybe minor at first, but wasn't.
Oh, what?
Persistent toothaches, teeth becoming loose for no apparent reason, developing sores, lesions, ulcers in their mouths and gums, and really, troublingly, when they had teeth extracted, the sockets just wouldn't heal properly, kept getting infected.
That sounds awful, and I imagine just the start.
Exactly. Those are often the early warnings. Then came the more severe systemic problems, things like anemia, low blood counts, bones becoming brittle, leading to spontaneous
It's
fractures.
raking.
Yeah, and this truly horrific condition called necrosis of the jaw, we call it radium jaw.
Radium jaw. What did that entail?
It's as grim as it sounds. The actual bone tissue in the jaw would die, decay. It led to terrible pain, infections, severe disfigurement. Parts of the jawbone could just crumble away.
Oh, my God.
And other issues, too. Suppression of menstruation, sterility in some cases. The radium was just wreaking havoc throughout their bodies.
Is it known when the first death occurred?
The records point to the first death of a dial painter, linked to this being in 1923, and the descriptions are harrowing. Reports say her jaw had deteriorated so badly it practically fell away from her skull before she
I
passed.
can't even fathom that level of suffering.
And it wasn't isolated. By 1924, just the next year, at one plant alone, the scale was becoming clear. 50 women were reported sick. A dozen had already died.
50 sick, 12 dead
Yeah.
in just one place.
Yeah. And by 1927, the overall death toll among the workers had climbed past 50. It was undeniable, really. This wasn't coincidence. It was a crisis directly linked to the radium.
So how did the companies react when this started coming out? Surely they had to acknowledge it.
You would think so, right? But no. Their response was, frankly, shameful, denial, disinformation.
They just denied the link.
Vehemently rejected any claims that radium was causing these illnesses. They even tried to influence doctors, researchers, put pressure on them to maybe attribute the deaths to other causes or to withhold data connecting it to radium.
It's deliberate deception.
It gets worse. They actively spread rumors, vicious rumors, suggesting the women had died from syphilis, for example.
Syphilis, why?
To discredit them, to ruin their reputations, to shift the blame away from the radium, away from the company's practices. It was a calculated, cruel tactic.
Unbelievable. And wasn't there a sort of grim irony involving the inventor of the paint?
Ah, yes, Dr. Sabin Arnold von Sakaki, the man who invented the luminous radium paint formula.
Right.
He himself died in 1928.
From radium poisoning.
Yes, from a plastic anemia brought on by his exposure to radium. Now, his exposure was likely different, probably more through handling materials in the lab, maybe inhaling dust rather than ingesting it like the women, but still.
But his death must have made it harder for the companies to keep denying the danger.
Absolutely. It became a pretty significant point, especially later in the legal battles. Hard to claim something's harmless when its inventor dies from it. It definitely added weight to the Radium Girls' claims and increased public awareness.
Which leads us to their fight for justice, the lawsuits.
Right. A truly courageous battle. It really kicked off in New Jersey. The woman named Grace Fryer was one of the first, determined to sue USRC.
And this got media attention.
Oh, huge attention. The newspapers latched onto the story. They used some pretty dramatic headlines, calling the women things like the living dead or doomed women.
Wow. Stark language. But it must have been incredibly difficult for them to even go to court.
Extremely difficult. Some of these women were so ill by the time the cases started. Some were bedridden. There are accounts of women being physically unable to even raise their arm to take the oath in the courtroom.
Heartbreaking. Who were the main women involved in that first New Jersey case?
Along with Grace Fryer, there was Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, and two sisters, Quinta McDonald and Albina Larice. Those five were the core group in that initial suit.
Did they win? What happened in New Jersey?
Well, USRC fought it at first, denied everything as usual, but the evidence was mounting, public pressure was growing. Eventually, in 1928, they reached a settlement.
What did the settlement involve?
Each of the five women received $10,000, which, was a substantial sum back then.
Right.
Plus, they got an annuity of $600 per year for life, which sounds okay, but it worked out to only about $12 a week.
Not a lot even then.
No. And the company also agreed to pay all their past and future medical expenses and their legal costs.
So some measure of justice maybe?
Yeah.
But given their health.
Exactly. That's the tragic postscript. Despite the settlement, the damage was done. All five of those women, those pioneers in the New Jersey case, were dead by the 1930s. The settlement couldn't buy back their health or their lives.
Such a heavy price. And the fight wasn't over, was it? What about in Illinois?
No, the fight continued there against the other big company, Radium Dial. Workers there started trying to get compensation even earlier, maybe around 1927, but they hit a brick wall. Management just refused, flat out denied responsibility.
So they had to sue too.
Eventually, yes, it took a while, but by 1937, a group of five women finally found a lawyer willing to take their case. His name was Leonard Grossman.
Did he charge them? They probably didn't have much money.
Incredibly no.
Yeah.
He saw the injustice and took the case pro bono, free of charge. He brought their case before the Illinois Industrial Commission, the IIC.
Okay, so a state commission rather than a regular court.
Yes, handling worker compensation claims. And they face a real battle there, too. But in the spring of 1938, the IIC did rule in their favor. They recognized the link between the work and the illnesses.
Great, so they won.
Well, yes and no. It was a victory, but Radium Dial played dirty. By the time the ruling came down, the company had actually shut down its Illinois plant and moved its operations to New York.
Oh no, so they just left.
Pretty much. And the Illinois Commission, the IAC, didn't have the legal power to force a company based in New York to pay up.
That's infuriating. Was that the end of it?
Not quite. There was another twist. The IAC had actually held back a $10,000 deposit from Radium Dial when they were operating in Illinois, sort of like a security bond in case of claims like these.
Smart move by the ISC.
Very. But Radium Dial didn't give up. They appealed the IAC's decision. They fought it tooth and nail, appealing higher and higher.
All the way.
All the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. But in 1939, the Supreme Court delivered the final blow to the company. They refused to even hear the appeal.
So the ISC ruling stood.
Yes, it upheld the Illinois ruling, which was a massive legal precedent, but the reality on the ground was complex. Because the company had moved and because of all the legal delays.
Some women didn't get paid.
Sadly, yes. Some of the Illinois women never received any financial compensation. And one of the key figures in that fight, Catherine Donahue, who was instrumental in pushing the case forward, she actually died before any final settlement was fully resolved.
Just devastating.
Yeah.
But their fight, their suffering, it wasn't for nothing, right? It had a larger impact.
Oh, absolutely. A profound and lasting impact. The story of the Radium Girls is, well, it's a landmark in several fields. Health physics, definitely. Women's rights. And the whole labor rights movement.
How so? What changed because of them?
Well, first off, their court cases were groundbreaking. They essentially established the right for individual workers to sue their employer, a corporation, for damages caused by, labor abuse or negligence regarding safety. That wasn't a given before.
That's huge. Setting a legal precedent.
Massive. It also directly led to the development and strengthening of labor safety standards, things we take for granted now. And it introduced this important concept into law, provable suffering.
Provable suffering, meaning?
Meaning workers could get compensation if they could demonstrate with evidence that their health problems were directly caused by their job conditions. It shifted the burden somewhat.
Right. And general safety regulations improved too.
Significantly. Industrial safety standards got a major overhaul, partly because of the horror of the Radium Girls story. And it culminated later, in 1949, when the U.S. Congress passed a really important bill.
What did that do?
It basically mandated compensation for workers who got sick from occupational diseases, a direct legacy of what these women endured and fought for.
And presumably practices changed in the dial painting industry itself.
Yes, eventually. Workers finally started getting proper safety instructions. They were given protective gear, masks, gloves, and crucially, that lethal practice, the lip dip paint method, was stopped, banned.
About time. Did they stop using radium paint altogether then?
Not immediately, surprisingly. Even with the known dangers, radium paint continued to be used in watches and instruments for decades.
Really? Until when?
Its use gradually declined, but it was still around into the 1970s. The very last radium dial painting factory in the U.S. only closed its doors in 1978.
Wow, 1978. That's much later than I would have thought.
It is. It shows how slow change can sometimes be, even after such a clear tragedy.
Now, before we get to the lasting legacy, I just want to remind everyone listening, if you're finding this story as compelling and important as we do, now is a great time to hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss any other deep dives we take into fascinating stories here on Tell Me More Stories Told As podcast.
Definitely. Okay, so beyond the legal and safety changes, there was also a significant scientific impact, wasn't there?
Yes, the scientific community learned a lot, tragically, from the Radium Girls.
Right. A key figure was Dr. Robley D. Evans. He did pioneering work actually measuring the amount of radium remaining in the bodies of former dial painters, some who were still alive years later.
And what did that lead to?
His measurements were absolutely crucial in establishing the first real scientific understanding of how much radium the human body could tolerate. It led to setting the first maximum permissible body burden for radium, a safety threshold.
So their suffering helped create safety standards for radiation exposure.
In a very direct way, yes. And there was more. The Center for Human Radiobiology at Argonne National Laboratory, they conducted a massive long-term study.
What did they look at?
They collected incredibly detailed medical histories and data on over 2,400 individuals who had been exposed to radium, mostly dial painters. This huge data set provided invaluable information on the long-term health effects, cancer risks, bone diseases, everything.
2,400 people? That's extensive.
Hugely extensive, and their research even helped refine understanding of different types of radium. It suggested that one isotope, radium-228, which was present in some of the paints, might actually be more biologically harmful than the more commonly studied radium-226. Important details for radiation protection.
And their story hasn't been forgotten, has it? It lives on in culture.
Not at all. It's been told and retold. There are excellent books, of course, but also plays D.W. Gregory's Radium Girls is quite well known.
I've heard of that one.
And Melanie Marnich's these Shining Lives, both very powerful stage adaptations. And there have been films, too. It's a story that continues to resonate and needs to be told.
It ensures their sacrifices, their fight, isn't lost to history.
Exactly. It keeps the conversation going about, corporate responsibility, ethics in industry, protecting workers, all still relevant.
Absolutely. So, wrapping this up, the story of the Radium Girls is just such a powerful and frankly sobering reminder. It shows the real human cost when progress or profit steamrolls over basic safety and ethics.
It really does. But it also highlights their incredible courage. Their fight didn't just expose their own suffering, it genuinely forced change. Huge changes in labor law, in our understanding of radiation safety.
What really stands out to me is their resilience. Facing unimaginable illness, company denials, public scrutiny, yet they fought back. They demanded justice.
Yeah, their determination in the face of all that is truly remarkable.
Yeah.
And their legacy forces us to keep asking important questions even today about how we balance innovation with worker protection, about corporate accountability when things go wrong.
It's a story that should make us all think about workplace safety now and the protections that exist, often because of struggles like theirs. We really encourage listeners to look more into their story. There are great resources out there.
Definitely. Reflect on how their fight maybe shapes our world today in ways we don't always realize. Well, thank you for joining us for this exploration on Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
Thank you.